Welcome to Practically Christian. I'm Janelle, and I'm here with my husband, Luke.
Hey, everyone.
And our friend, Jake.
Hey.
We share conversations that help you know Jesus more deeply and follow him more faithfully. The truth is, no one has arrived at Christ-likeness. To grow in that direction, we believe that you need authentic relationships and biblical theology applied to your everyday life. We hope that you're encouraged to grow and to live out the biblical truths that we discuss on this episode. So let's get practical and dive into a conversation about disagreeing well.
Yeah, so this is going to be a series where we're going to do 4 episodes and kind of look at different parts of what it means to disagree well, and what it means to listen in disagreement, and what it means to either kind of hash out disagreements, whether they be about like personal life or theology, and what it looks like when you just can't hash out those disagreements as we get a little bit later on. The reason we're talking about this is because there is a lot, and you probably know this, there is a lot in our culture right now that people hold their views very strongly and are pretty unconvincible, and you might feel that way about yourself. You might feel that way about only the other people who you meet with on Thanksgiving Day. But even like a lot of the advice that you hear kind of circulate around is like, yeah, just don't argue with that uncle during Thanksgiving. And it's like, why are we so afraid of these conversations? And part of it's because other people don't disagree well, and part of it might be because we don't disagree well. Mm-hmm. So what does it look like for us to at least hold our end of the bargain in disagreeing with other people well? Mm-hmm. So to start out, what was a time that you changed your mind on something, whether it be because about a disagreement with someone else, or you just ended up changing your mind on a pretty big thing?
The one that comes to mind for me, I think it's on my mind because we had this funny thing happen at church where I put a video out there to help our church community, and then it kind of went viral for us anyway. It's not really viral. You probably haven't heard of it.
It was fun. So yeah, it wasn't like viral, but it was like 10,000 views.
Yeah.
But the funniest part is that it was like above 10% comment to view ratio, and literally still has like 10 likes.
Yeah, so people didn't like it, but they commented on it. But I'm thinking about that because the video was kind of responding to dispensationalism, which I know it's a big word. You might be unfamiliar with it. It has a bunch of different aspects to it. But the long and short of it is I went to high school in a dispensational church. I didn't know that. I didn't even know what that word meant. Again, there's lots of pieces to it. One of the pieces, though, is like this idea of a pre-tribulational rapture that Jesus will return before a literal 7-year tribulation. And when he returns, he's going to take all believers off of the earth for that time. And so that's the view that I had. Like, if you've ever read the Left Behind series or heard of them, that's the view put out in those books. When you asked this question, Jake, I thought of how I just kind of grew up with that view. Like, I thought that was the biblical view. I didn't know there were other views. And then it wasn't until I went to a Christian college and took New Testament survey and Old Testament survey and Christian theology that then I even learned the term dispensationalism, and plus some of the other things are connected with that view. Mm-hmm. And then was able to evaluate in comparison to some other views, and became convinced that view was not correct. So,
yeah. Fair.
And the one that came to mind for me, I'm similar to Luke in that it was like an inherited view. It wasn't like I had decided on believing something and then changed my mind so much, but that it was what I was raised with. So in my church tradition growing up, infant baptism was normal. And you would have adult baptism sometimes, if that was like their, coming from a non-Christian background, essentially, they would be baptized as adults too. But infant baptism was my personal experience. I was baptized as an infant, and I never even really thought anything of that. I was like, yeah, I was baptized. I know that I was because my parents told me that I was, not that I remember it personally. And then basically we came to Creekside, and this is a Baptist church. So if you know anything about Baptist churches, they have very strong opinions about how baptism should work. And I was like, okay, that's fine that you think that, but and then it like applied to me because I couldn't become a member here until I was baptized as a believer. And it took me a little while to like come around to even considering it, because it was almost like, but I have been baptized and I have been following Jesus for a while now, like where it felt like
I checked all the boxes. I did it in the wrong order, but I did it or something.
Yeah, and also like what is I don't want to do this to please the pastor, or I don't want to like do this for to become a member. Like I was like, I don't know. It almost be like I want to get married in order to have my taxes be jointly filed. It's like that doesn't I wanted to actually do it for the right reason. So I had to like come around to feeling like that was actually a good decision for me and not just for some external reason. But then I did. Basically came to the understanding of like, if baptism is a symbol of proclaiming your faith in Jesus, like I can do that symbol again, or just even if this is like the first time, like I could do this over and over again if it is just a way of saying, hey everybody, I follow Jesus. So that's kind of how.
Yeah, and I think it was at Colossians, and this is kind of a tangent, but like because Colossians 2:12, I think, that says your baptism is an external sign of your internal circumcision. It's a external sign of the internal truth that you've died with Christ and risen again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at the history, I think a lot of infant baptism came from the fact that they wanted their babies to be saved before they could have died. So like there was a false understanding that if you died without being baptized, that you weren't saved. So you don't want your baby to be damned, and so you get your baby baptized as soon as you can, because you want that baby to be saved.
And that's not the theological reason why a lot of people today hold it. Like their
theology is built on,
but that was the foundational practice that then theology. Yeah, that's true. How about you, Jake?
Yeah, I think so. Mine, the one that stands out to me the most is actually young Earth versus old Earth creationism. And I think when I grew up, I kind of grew up in a young Earth creationist like mindset. And when I grew up, I mean, like it was like my family wasn't like overtly Christian. Like we like talked about Christ. My mom like talked about Christ, but we didn't like it wasn't like a big deal. Yeah. And then like I got convinced through a lot of podcasting and some people that were around me, partly Luke, about old Earth creationism. And then I still remember this. I was like, because I had like, all these objections to like young Earth creationism. And then I was driving on County Road 158 at one point, and I was like, and I had like, slowly like those objections had kind of like gone away. And then I was like, my last one was, it would be deceptive for God to have us see stars that are so far away. And like, it was like, did God create light in transit that didn't actually come from those stars? Because basically the idea of like, if a star is 1,000 light years away, or 10,000 light years away, then it would be longer than like kind of the young Earth creationist understanding. And so God would have had to create that light in transit, and then it would have been deceptive because it wouldn't have actually been from that star at that point, right? And then I was just driving at one point, I was like, or God wanted to show off how cool his creation was, and the whole deception thing is like a dumb argument. And like I was like, and I know people who hold that argument, but I was like, in my mind, I was like, I really don't care about that argument. I think that's bad. And I just remember thinking that while I was driving. And then I was kind of like, well, if that's the last thing that was kind of like holding me out of that, I was like, oh, I guess I'm a young Earth creationist now.
That's interesting. That reminds me of not that these are anywhere near the same level of intensity, but it reminds me of C.S. Lewis's story of becoming a Christian is like that. I don't know if you know the story, but he's like, I got on the bus here, and by the time I got on the bus, I had decided, yes, I am a Christian, and there wasn't any like one super momentous thing. It was just like, I think I see it now. Like the pieces.
Yeah, the pieces kind of like went together. Yeah. So, we're going to move to a passage. We're going to go to James 3:13 through 18. And this is a passage about wisdom. I'm going to be reading in the ESV, which is a good translation. It's actually not the one I used to read the most often, but I think it works really well for this passage. So this is James 3:13 through 18. For who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So our question just is, from that list, kind of starting in verse 17 and then going through 18, which one of those stands out to you as maybe the most important or an important one for disagreeing in a wise way? I'm going to read the list one more time so that everyone can hear it. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So which one of those stands out to you the most as important for disagreeing well?
The one that stands out to me is the one that says peaceable. And I know in this translation it says peace loving, which is a kind of a fun way to put it. But I do think that a lot of times when we are in a disagreement, there's almost like a pride issue that comes up where you want to be right for your own pride and ego. And so it's like, if the goal is really peace and truth, it's like a very different thing than like, I feel like the pride aspect makes you like combative, almost for combativeness sake. So I think the peaceful one, if everyone would be peaceable and disagreeing, it would have a very different ring to it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. The one that jumped out to me, probably because I didn't totally understand what it meant in this context, is when it says, first of all, pure. The wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure. And I was just thinking, like, what does pure mean, especially in the context of like disagreeing well? But I was thinking similar to what you said, Janelle, of like your heart motivations not being driven by other things, like holy in the sense of just separate from all the other things that could motivate a desire to win an argument or to be heard. I know in the next episode we're going to talk about the art of listening, but I think it also relates to having that attitude of being eager to understand and open to, open to truth.
Yeah, in some sense, like being pure means like not having hidden motives.
Yeah.
Partially.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, the one that, that's actually the reason I chose that the ESV translation is that it says open to reason, where it's like so often we can like be in the space and we can think we're open to reason, or we think that we have the reasonable or the logical argument. And it's like actually often, like not always, but often there's disagreements between people because both people think they have the logical argument. Right. And it's like, so being open to hearing other people's reasonable arguments and other people's logical arguments, because especially in theology, but also just in life in general, like there's a good shot that both sides have a logical, reasonable argument. And so like being open to hearing people out in that.
Yeah, I think it's like a fun, this would never happen, but if you could snap your fingers and every Christian was automatically peaceable and pure and open to reason, and be like, wow, what would the world be like in Christian community?
Yeah, and actually one of the crazy things is like, in my mind, like even if those three things were true, people would still have disagreements.
That's true. Yeah, we'd still see things differently.
Yeah, and we'd still have disagreements, but we'd also probably do them a lot better.
Do you think there's almost like a training that happens against being open because we're like, people are against the truth and you should just believe it anyway? I don't know. Do you think there's almost like a subtle like bad
it's like
training?
With the apologetics and like the defense of Christianity, is that you're thinking about like stand up for what you believe in? And...
yeah, and like don't submit to the wrong thing, and but I feel like that is a truth that can be twisted into
Mhm.
like ugliness.
Never change your mind.
And never change your mind, and don't be open to reason, and don't be peaceable about it, and all the things.
There can be a little bit of like a pride in like, I think a lot of people like, and you actually see this in witnessing even, right? Where it's like, when you are talking to someone, it's so easy to try to push for them to make a change in that moment.
Mm.
And they're also less likely, I think, to make that change in that moment than they are if they go and think about it.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's especially when I talk to Mormons, that's kind of Mormon missionaries, that's a lot how I think is like, you're sowing the seeds so that they'll change their mind, but you're not going to like succeed in being like, change your mind right now. And it's because everyone in America seems to have, or like our American culture has a very strong, like, don't show weakness in the moment. Like, you have to like show that you stand on your beliefs. And it's like, yes, unless they're wrong. And then you could yeah. So, kind of going on that, do you think it's more common for people to hold their beliefs too strongly or for people to hold their beliefs too loosely? And this question kind of comes from the title of this episode, which is being convincible but not gullible.
Mm.
So, like, do you think that people tend to hold their beliefs too strongly or too loosely?
I know you're asking about people in general.
Yeah.
What came to mind is that for Christians, I have seen, at least like zoomed out for a lot of people, they have a tendency to actually hold some of the non-essentials of the Christian faith too tightly, in my opinion.
Yep.
And some of the essentials too loosely.
Yeah.
Where they're almost flip-flopped of what I think they should be.
Yeah. Or even like moved to the middle, where it's like you have two sets of beliefs, and it's okay to hold these ones really tightly, right? You should hold the essentials really tightly.
Yeah.
And it's okay to hold these ones more loosely. And it's like there's like a squeezing towards the middle.
Correct. Yes.
For some reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, people think their view of the end times, and they put that on the same level as the Trinity.
Yeah.
For salvation. It's like these are not on the same level, but they think they are.
Are you talking about Christians specifically or people in general?
Kind of how you want to take it.
Well, I would say what I see is a lot of relativism, which is basically the view that you are able to hold your own truth and other people can have different truths, and that's okay. So in that sense, like I have seen that a lot. And actually, when we watch a lot of shows and movies, like that's a very strong thread in a lot of cinema that we watch too. But in that sense, it's like they hold strongly to a personal view for themselves, but they almost deny the reality of an objective truth,
or that other people should hold that view.
Yeah, so it's almost like I've seen it with Christians too, where they're like, I'm a Christian, but you do you, kind of like where it's like, but if Christianity is true, then it's true, period. Like either Jesus is God or he's not. Like there's not like he's God for me, but you do you. Figure out what you want to believe. So I think it's like I think it's almost a blend of holding something strongly, but also loosely.
Relativism.
Relativism is like the thing that they're holding strongly to.
So it kind of reminds me of one of my favorite books is by G.K. Chesterton, like most of my favorite books are. It's called The Ball and the Cross. And in it, he's trying to use like the ball as like symbolizing reason and the cross faith, right? But it's maybe the most ridiculous like book premise of all time. It's this Catholic guy, because G.K. Chesterton was Catholic, who runs a Catholic newspaper. And across the street from him is an atheist who runs an atheist newspaper. And they like basically write newspaper articles against each other, and they hate each other. And then kind of the beginning of the book is they challenge each other to a duel to the death with pistols. And they set the date, and they both show up, and they find out that it's that day been made illegal to duel. And so the rest of the book is them fighting and running away from the law so that they can duel each other to the death. And they become friends during this runaway thing. And it's like it's so funny, but like part of the book, you literally, it's like page 150. It almost feels like the book changes to the point when I read it, or like when I first read it, I flipped the page and I thought I had missed like 5 chapters. Because it's like this whole thing, they're running through England and like they get on this boat and then it like switches and it's like, as like Sir Gusteau was riding through the field, and they make new lives and stage a romantic anger towards each other where they're both going after the same girl because they're like, the French will let us duel over this. And then like the French are like, yeah, that's fine, a duel over love, but then they find out that it's actually about their ideas and they stop them and they're like, it's not okay to duel over ideas though. Anyway, so it's like a ridiculous book, but the whole thing comes down to like, it's okay to stand on everything except for what you believe. Is like how like they experience like this thing where the whole world is telling them stand on everything except for
Interesting.
the truth.
We stand on romance.
Yeah.
Truth isn't important.
But truth isn't important, and that's just a belief in kind of like relativism, right? Anyways, it's a really funny book.
Interesting. I don't think I've read that one.
It's a trump. Like at one point, they literally meet a cannibal who tries to eat them. And they're like, perfect, let us duel and you can eat the loser. And he's like, no, that's not okay. Like, you can't do that. Anyways.
Wow.
So when you are being convinced, what would you describe, like, I don't know, this is a weird phrase, but it's the only one I could think of. Like, what's the heart posture of being someone who's convincible but not gullible?
What I think of is someone who knows what they believe. First of all, you have to have like something that you understand about what you believe and like why, and then you can interact with other ideas that are in conflict with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it starts with like an understanding of. So, for instance, if we go back to my baptism thing, it's almost like I hadn't considered baptism. I hadn't like looked at it biblically. I hadn't considered I just had accepted.
You'd absorbed.
I'd absorbed, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
what I had learned. And I think we do that with a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like your knowledge is like tacit understanding instead of like a considered understanding, if that makes sense. So I think in order to be in a good way, like strong in your belief and not gullible to just the winds of culture or the winds of argumentation, like I think you have to have a considered position that you can then stand on that ground to like look at the other options.
Yeah, I was thinking about your question, and I think there's like a generic humility that has to come first before you even get to particular issues. So what I mean is, I've spoken to a few people throughout life where I almost get the impression of like, in their mind, they know everything, and anyone who disagrees is like a moron. It's like, at least the way they communicate, like, evokes that idea. And I think you have to get to like a fundamental place of knowing that you don't know everything and being real about that, and knowing. I think it helps if you've gone through a few rounds of being shown to be wrong and realizing you're wrong, or really knowing well some people who disagree with you and realizing that they have really good reasons for their disagreement. Like if you can have those kinds of conversations, I think those are humbling conversations, because then you can't just do like some people disagree, but like they're just dumb.
They just don't understand.
They just don't understand. And so I don't know. I think there's like that fundamental humility of not only being able to say, but like really believe like other people have other views and they have good reasons for having those views, and I might have to work to understand those reasons or something. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Yeah. In some sense, there's a little bit of I think you're kind of getting at like a little bit of a intellectual empathy.
Yeah, sure.
Kind of space of like it's kind of like until you've walked a mile in their shoes, it's like the same is true kind of for like when you are having discussions.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to say it. I think you talked about the idea of steel manning the other argument, and that doesn't originate with you, but if you can do that in an argument, like that's means you understand it to the point where the other person would be able to say, yes, not only is that my view, but like you articulated it better than I could even.
Yeah. I think that even goes towards one of the things that Luke does, which is actually extremely irritating to be a part of, is when Luke does like mediation. And when he does mediation, he goes, and he can correct me on this, but what he does is he goes, okay, well, so person A is going to explain what they're feeling and why they're feeling it. And then person B, you're not allowed to respond to that. You have to like tell them what you have to like basically like repeat in your own words what they're feeling and why they're feeling it.
Yeah.
And then person A has to like agree that you've understood them. And if not, you do it again. And then you switch roles. And it's like literally actually very annoying to be a part of. But it is kind of like that same kind of like practice of like you have to be able to articulate their position in that disagreement.
And when we've made couples practices, I don't think there's been one time where either one of them said, you know, this is what happened, this is how it made me feel, and that the other person got it right the first time. I don't think that's ever happened. I think almost always they're like, well, I mean, sort of, but really.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, they think they understood. And if you hadn't gone through this process, they'd be responding with their deficient understanding.
And I think, at least in that relational process, I think you also find that the person who's articulating it is almost getting a clearer view of the hurt, because a lot of times it's like there was like an emotional hurt and then they're like trying to articulate what the source of that was. So I think it's also a discovery process. It's not necessarily just that person B didn't understand person A completely.
That's true.
Yeah. So kind of like from the heart posture, how do you go through the process of being convinced, or what does it look like to go through that process well?
Do you have an answer?
I think the biggest part to me is to, and this kind of goes a little bit to heart posture too, is like being willing to reckon with like another person's argument. And I go to reckon, I mean like to actually like go, what does this mean? What if I am wrong? Like, let me look at all the evidence again or like anew, and let me come at it from like a third party perspective. To kind of there's like the space of like I'm trying to convince someone, so I'm on my side of the argument and they're on their side of the argument, and then like from that position, whether it be in the moment or afterwards, to then say, okay, well, obviously the best person to make argument A has made it because that's me, and then the person like B is a good arguer for their position. Let me look at both those arguments as if I hold neither. And to say which one actually makes sense of the data.
And you actually do that?
Yeah. So like there's a one of the examples, and this actually didn't end up with me changing my mind.
Sure.
But me and my roommate Ben were because I am who I am. I'm part of like a Christian Discord that does like disagreements, and like they talk about disagreements. And someone brought up a passage. It was. I'm not going to get the exact first reference correct, but it was Lamentations 3, I think, verse 25 through 27. And there was like, basically it said, the part of it says, who can say something and have it come true if the Lord hasn't commanded it? And I was like, and then they were saying like, oh, look, if you want to do something, you can't do it unless the Lord has commanded it. So God's actually determined for you to do what you're going to do. And I was like, I have no idea what to do with that. Like, and like, I remember like having that conversation with Ben. I was like, maybe I am wrong. Like, I'm gonna have to do a lot of research on this verse. I like literally like waited to deal with it until I was at church again. I could grab my commentary on Lamentations to like look at it. And then, you know, through all of it, I came to my understanding. I think the proper understanding of the passage being that it's about prophecy, not about action. And he's saying like, hey, these false prophets and Jeremiah, this real prophet, there's a big difference. One of them says prophecy and it hasn't happened. And it's because the Lord is giving him that prophecy. But like there was like a very big like, I don't know what to do with this, like kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you kind of had to engage with it, being willing to consider that you could be wrong.
Yeah. And what does that mean for like all of the other theology that I, know, have kind of thing, or like what I know of God. But it's like, but if it's true, then it's true. So like,
yeah.
I think that helps me articulate something is that, so backstory, when I did my Master's of Divinity degree, at Denver Seminary, the way they do it is your final project is actually, it's not a dissertation or it's not a thesis. It's not a big paper or comprehensive. You actually have to write out your own personal doctrinal statement and then defend it. And I am not a Calvinist, but I knew I was going to be defending against two Calvinists. And for whatever reason, like knowing that that was coming, maybe like be like, look, like these are smart guys. Like it'd be really convenient if I were a Calvinist. I could get through more easily. Yeah. And I almost like went back to the debate, went back to my textbooks and like reread a bunch of scriptures with that question in mind, which I'd already done once through theology and at other points too. And it was one of those where like I looked at everything all over again and kind of the evidence on both sides. But what I was thinking about when you were talking about this particular subject, Jake, is that I think it's a good thing for us to do personally when we're faced with a new view and being convincible, or when we're talking to someone who disagrees with us, to kind of evaluate whether or not what they need or what we need is more evidence for and against the two views, or if we need understanding of those views. I think those are like two different things. Or the way I think about it is like, we all have like these mental frameworks or like boxes that we put things in. And it's almost like before you can put evidence into that box, you have to have that box correct. Like if you misunderstand the thing, it doesn't matter how much evidence you have for or against it, or how much evidence you give to someone else. Like if you say, here's all the evidence why I'm not a Calvinist and why I'm a provisionist or whatever. And if they don't understand what provisionism means, like all you're trying to do then is convince them away from this thing they believe without bringing them to something else.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just really important to differentiate those two things when you're hearing an argument, like, do I even understand what this person's arguing for? Or do they understand what I'm arguing for?
What is this conversation actually about?
Yeah. Is it about understanding the thing, or is it giving evidence for and against the thing?
Any thoughts, Janelle? What does it look like, or what is the process that you go through when you are being convinced?
I think my problem with being convinced or having a productive conversation and disagreement.
So you're always right.
Oh yeah, I'm always right. But I think I want to jump to the end too quickly, which doesn't let you listen. So I think the main thing is like being a good listener and not rushing past. Like that's just my tendency is like I want to get to the end, like, okay, so what about this? Instead of going through that disagreement process with somebody. And I think that's like maybe a pride issue too, like being like, I'm ready for the next phase of this discussion when it's not actually there yet. So being a good listener, I guess.
Okay. So kind of more practical, when was a time that you held on to something you believed too strongly, and that you either like ended up causing like strife, or that you didn't give the other person a fair hearing? And this doesn't necessarily mean that you were wrong or that you believe that you were wrong, but like where you just held it too strongly, whether you still have that view now or whether you like changed your view.
Yeah, I actually have a follow-up question and almost maybe objection to the question.
Okay.
Because we're talking about like being convincible but not gullible. But there are some things that I'm like not really honestly convincible about. But I would say it's not because I'm not open. It's because in the past I was open. And I looked at the evidence and I haven't heard any new evidence. So like if someone came to me and I'm like, well, actually this new evidence came out, I might be open. I don't know. But at this point, like, so going back to my first example, like dispensationalism is a good example. Like if someone came to me and was like, I think you're wrong about your view of end times. I think, this particular view is correct. I'd be like, that's great. I used to hold that view. I understand that view very well. I grew up with it. I've looked at the evidence for and against it. I'm convinced it's wrong and very biblically weak. Like, you're going to have a hard job convincing me. Like, I don't, like, just if I'm honest with myself, I don't think I'm convincible. But I also think it's okay.
So I have a question. If the evidence changed,
yeah,
or if there was new evidence, could you change your mind? Or could you be convinced?
I don't know, honestly.
Okay.
It's hard to imagine that.
Yeah.
Based off of everything I know, it's almost impossible to imagine.
Well, I think the thing with that specific thing is you have encountered lots of people who are less educated on it, who have a strong opinion of it.
Correct.
And so I think that experience over and over and over again makes it like, it's almost like if you're an expert and someone is arguing against you who is not, and that's kind of been
Yeah.
your experience over and over again. So I think it would be different if you talk to someone who wasn't in that different place from
Sure,
you.
like a scholar or PhD who
Yeah.
holds their view very rationally.
Yeah, I guess I would differentiate between being convincible and being open to conversations that you've already had. That is different things.
I see.
That convincible is a mindset about discussions and about beliefs, and not a thing that's oriented towards every instance.
Every belief you have.
Yes, right. So we're in a sense of I believe that Jesus died on the cross. I think that the best evidence says that he did and that he rose again. If a bunch of new evidence came out that went against that and it was very solid evidence, I could be convinced away from that. But because I've looked at the evidence right now, I'm convincible, or I have been convincible about that. It just isn't there. That's different than the mindset. Differentiating the mindset of being willing to be convinced.
It's like you want the truth. You kind of have to be in a position of wanting the truth still, I guess.
Regardless of where it leads.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you've done a lot of research on something, you think that you're in that space.
Yeah.
And that's okay to be, I don't know, that's okay to be there.
So my answer to this is not so intellectual or even faith-based, but I was thinking about arguments with my kids, basically, when they're like, Mom, I want to be able to do this thing that I'm not allowed to do because of this, this, and this. And I'm like, no. I think, so sometimes I handle it well, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm a good listener, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I hear where they're going, and I think it could partly be the parent mentality of knowing my kid and knowing where they're going. But I know that I tend to be impatient with that process. So often they'll be kind of in the middle of their explanation, and I understand what the explanation is from the first few words of their explanation of why. And then I just want to be like, no, because blah, blah, blah. And then whenever I do that, I'm like, that's not fair to them. They're trying to articulate what they want and why, and I need to listen and acknowledge, even if I maintain my no, acknowledge what is good about their request, or what, the validity of their feelings, for instance, or whatever else. So I think that actually causes strife because then they don't feel heard. So it's even though I'm the parent, I have the right to say no. I have the right not even to listen to their to their arguments if I don't want to. But I feel in patience and respect for them, I need to grow in listening all the way through the end, affirming what I can affirm about their point of view, and then explaining my point of view.
But it's so tiring.
It is tiring. And sometimes, and that's the thing, I like I said before, I want to jump to the end. The jump to the end is you don't get to do it.
Here's why.
Here's why, or not even here's why. You don't get to do it. The end. but that's not the kind of parent I want to be. Just to be I said no, so no. But or it helps me analyze my reasons too, because sometimes it's well, do I have a good reason?
Or is this just the reason it has been?
Yeah. Or is it, it kind of parses a little bit of am I just being selfish, or am I actually trying to guide my child in an important way? Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the lines that I've walked, because I have strong beliefs about basically everything that I believe is a strong belief. And I feel like I'm pretty convincible, but as soon as I switch, I'll strongly believe that thing. I don't have a medium belief, if that makes sense. And that includes my opinion on movies and everything else. But I think when I can tell that I'm holding something too tightly is when I feel like I have to jump in if someone's saying something I disagree with. And is can I just let someone say something that's obviously incorrect because I'm right. Like, but like, can I let someone say something that like I disagree with without making it a discussion?
Mm.
And I think like that's oftentimes to me like going back to like the Thanksgiving kind of like thing. It's like the problem isn't always that people disagree. The problem more often is that people can't like let something they disagree with slide by.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's okay like for me to someone says something politically that I disagree with, or like that I disagree with their like reasoning behind something, and it doesn't really matter that much. That I can just be like, yeah, cool. Like that is a belief that you have. Like everything doesn't have to become a discussion.
Yeah, you don't have to convince everyone to agree with you on everything that ever comes up that you could possibly get them to agree with you on.
Yeah. So, kind of finally, if you were going to give one piece of advice about being convincible in a good way, so not being gullible, but like when it comes to making sure that you are in a place to be convinced, what would that piece of advice be? We may have already talked about it, and you can kind of go back to that, but
yeah, it goes back to like understanding. Like, can you articulate why someone would believe the other side? Or oftentimes there's 3 or 4 other sides too. Like, can you actually articulate really well why the other person believes differently than you? I think that's a good thing to practice and be able to do.
I think kind of going on that is similarly like, can you fairly follow someone's logic? Because like one of the frustrating things that I've done before, and that I've like witnessed people do before, is that because they disagree, they're unwilling to like follow the argument. Where it's like, I need to argue this step. It's like, no, just like understand that if A, then B, like that's a logical statement. Doesn't mean you have to agree with A.
Yeah.
You understand the logic.
But do you understand that if A, then B kind of thing? And it's like being willing to like let them set up the logical chain. And then kind of see the logic behind the argument, even if you don't agree with like the things that have started it.
Yeah. I just go back to, we talked about it already, but like we want to be people of truth, and so we shouldn't be scared of seeking the truth. So like being convincible in some ways means don't cling too hard to things, because if they're not true, you don't want to cling to that. So like cling to truth, but not in a way that's like, I won't be convinced of anything else. Because it's like, well, then if you're wrong, you're going to stay there, and there's no way to get out of that.
You're like, cling to the truth, not to your specific opinions on the truth, kind of thing.
Yeah. Or be willing to like be challenged in your understanding, because you want to do the right thing. You want to know the true thing. But like having that open-hearted mindset of, this is the real goal, is to live the truth or to seek the truth. So
yeah, I just want to jump off that real quick. I know, but I think sometimes in our minds, like our mindset going into one of these conversations or in the midst of it, can be like, well, I have to hold on to my belief because it's this thing, and if that's wrong, then this is right. And like we tend to set up an either or. But for me, oftentimes in those conversations, understanding this other person's view better, even if I keep what I came into that with, it's like I keep it differently. Like I understand what I believe even better. Or sometimes it's not, now I believe this. It's actually like I see this differently. I still hold the same belief, but
it's like a deeper understanding.
Yeah, deeper understanding. Yeah. But I just wanted to say that in the encouragement of it's like, as you seek truth, like, don't you want to understand truth even better than you do? Like, it's one thing just to say something and have like an intellectual assent to it than it is to have like a deep down understanding of it and why it's important and the facets of it.
Yeah. Well, so our application or thing that we want you to work on or think about this week is actually to think about what view, or maybe more than one view, that you have that you've maybe inherited that you don't know the reasons behind, and to take that and actually think about what are the reasons behind that view, and kind of more of like map out what the view is, whether that be, like Janelle was talking about infant baptism or dispensationalism or whatever it could be, kind of map out a view that you might not have ever really thought about that much. So join us next week for as we talk for our second episode, as we talk about the art of listening, which, according to some people, is one of Luke's top 5 best skills.
Some people.
That's some people being me. So I'm going to close this in prayer, and we will talk to you next week.
Can I share a quote before you close?
Yeah, go for it.
I came across a G.K. Chesterton quote that I thought fit this really well. He said, "It's easier to fool someone than to convince them they have been fooled."
Oh, there you go.
Anyway,
Wow.
there you go.
That's G.K. Chesterton, greatest writer in according to 100% of people that have been asked. So, Lord, thank you for this day and this time to get together. Lord, we ask that us and that all the people who listen to this will contemplate what it means to be convincible, what it means to hold the truth more highly than our own opinions. Lord, help us all to seek after you, who is the truth. In Jesus' name, amen.